Rebecca's joining the show. Rebecca, how are
Thanks
you?
for asking me to join you.
Yeah,
I'm
totally.
doing well.
It's good. It's good to see you again. So, what's the temperature like there in southern Indiana?
It's pretty cold today, probably in the 40s now, I think. We had some storms yesterday, so there's a lot of trees down, but it's been warm in recent weeks, but it's pretty cold today.
Yeah, it's colder down here too, here in Texas. We've started off pretty similar with everybody, and I always like to hear, how was your breast cancer found when you were diagnosed in 2015? How did you find it, or how was it discovered?
I had a conversation with a coworker who happened to have breast cancer, and that reminded me that it was time to have my mammogram. So I had a routine mammogram, or had a typical exam,
Right.
which prompted a mammogram. And at that mammogram, they had some magnification plates, so I knew that they were looking at something more seriously. And then they ultrasounded the area, and I felt that when I left that day, that I felt pretty sure I had cancer, just based upon some keywords that the technician had said. She didn't say anything she shouldn't have said, but I was just being very aware of her words. So I felt pretty certain that I had cancer then. So 2 weeks later, I had a biopsy that confirmed that. And then 2 weeks after that, I had a lumpectomy.
Wow. Yeah. So, how often were you being screened back then? You were 48 years old, and were you going annually at that time?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So it was a routine screening, and it was found. I mean, that just, we touched on it a little bit throughout the broadcast, but I mean, that just stresses the importance of those screenings. Some of the folks who've joined, it was from self-exams, and some are from routine screenings. It's just being aware. That must have been really scary when you were having your mammogram and you saw them really looking at it close. And what were you thinking at that time?
Even at the doctor's appointment, which they at that point they order a mammogram for that age. She didn't feel anything in the exam. So when I left there, I just thought typical mammogram.
Right.
Waited a couple of days to schedule it. So. But when I left that day, I felt fairly confident that something was not right.
Right. So what happened next?
In October of 2015, early October, I had the lumpectomy. I was given a choice of what I wanted, but you have to make decisions so quickly. So based on where the cancer was, that was the decision that we felt was best. And then a month later, I started chemotherapy. So I went through 4 rounds of chemo spaced every 3 weeks apart. And I handled that pretty well. So that was from early November until early January of 2016. And then a year ago, right now, I was going through radiation. So I did 18 radiations after that.
Wow.
In February of last year.
So right after you had the biopsy done, that's when they told you it was actually triple negative, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And
yeah.
had you heard of that before?
No. I mean, my mother and grandmother had breast cancer before, so I knew about the big 3. I knew about the 3 things that typically fuel breast cancer: estrogen, progesterone, and the HER2 protein.
Right.
But I did not know of triple negative breast cancer. So you learn a lot along the way.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about you, but I knew my doctor told me everything over the phone. I lived about an hour away from my doctor at that time, and he was like, "Go read up about it, but make sure you're reading reputable sources, and you need to read up on it." And anything you find on the internet about triple negative breast cancer is bad. I mean, it's one of the more rare and aggressive forms of breast cancer, more likely to recur. That's why it's so important to find it early. as with any breast cancer, but
Right.
especially with something like triple negative breast cancer. So you said that they said a lumpectomy was all you really needed, and you had the chemo and actually radiation. I think only one other person who's joined today had radiation. I think that was Claire. Tell us about radiation. We haven't really talked about that very much. How does that affect your day-to-day life? What does that do to you?
Well, actually, I went into it thinking if I had gone through chemo, this was going to be a breeze. So I really think that mental attitude has a lot to do with it, not necessarily how your skin is going to react, etc. But I would drop my son off at school. I was able to arrange it at a time where I could drop him off at school, go to radiation, and then go to work. So It almost just felt like a routine. You know, the month of February last year, I just had a different routine, really kind of a different place to get my coffee. I mean, I tried to, talk to the nurses and,
right.
I tried to develop relationships and you see the same people. And radiation's a little different than your typical doctor's appointment, at least where I went, because you go directly to the radiation area. You don't have to wait in a waiting room and then wait for the doctor. You go right to the area. I think a lot of this, I think people's reaction to us is often how we spin it ourselves. So, people would say, "Oh, how's it going?" And I would kind of refer to it as a glorified suntan bed visit. And I would say that so it would lighten the mood for everybody.
Right.
I don't want to make it any less serious than what it is, but I just tried to go into it with a positive attitude. And my attitude through the whole journey was I needed to be as normal as possible.
Yeah.
And by making myself feel normal, it helped me feel more normal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally does. And you did some other things, right, that to make yourself feel normal?
Yeah, I had gone into it. I teach at a local college, so information gives me power. I love information, so I did a lot of research on wigs and hair and just the coping of the effects of chemotherapy and radiation. So I had told myself if there was any way possible that I could get through it without seeing myself with no hair, that would be the way I would go. And that wouldn't be, I didn't know if I could do it, but that was my goal. So I found someone who sells wigs that can be adhered to your head, just as men sometimes adhere a toupee.
Uh-huh.
So it was a special kind of wig, but it really wasn't that much more than a nice human hair wig. And I had it adhered, and then about once a month I would have it removed and put back on. So she would cover up the mirrors. So she's the only one that saw me with no hair. Was my hairdresser.
So how do they what do they use to adhere it? Is it painful or is it just hot glue?
No, it's
Dave said hot glue.
Like a medical grade adhesive. It's a medical grade adhesive.
Does that hurt when they take it off? It sounds like it could be painful.
No, because they put solvent on it that kind of like Gooby Gone, it's something to make it less sticky, and then it would come off. Yeah.
So
about the time I would have it re-adhered, it was starting to get a little bit loose anyway, just from your skin, exfoliating. So to have it removed wasn't bad because they put a product on it to loosen the glue, and then she would basically give my head a facial. And then I would have it put back on, and I did that about once a month. And in the meantime, I would wash it just like you normally wash a wig.
Was it your hair that you had shaved off previously?
No, it was just a human hair wig. But when I was diagnosed, I was growing my hair to donate it to probably Pantene. I had done that before. So when I cut my hair before I had the wig put on, I cut it with the intention that I was going to use it.
Right.
either have a wig made out of it or extensions or something. So during the week I was recuperating from surgery, did a lot of research because that was my coping mechanism. And I found a salon and a very kind gentleman in Minneapolis. His name is John Richards. So it's John Richards Salon in Minneapolis. And he's willing to put extensions on hair that's about an inch and a half long. So
wow.
For about 3 months, I was in contact with him. Usually they don't use your own hair. Usually they use extension hair, but he was willing to use mine.
Wow, that's so cool, right?
Yeah. So in June of last year, I went to his salon. I went with my son, and we made a trip out of it. So it was a great time with him. And so I sat in a salon chair all day, and he basically glued my hair back to my head. So my hair is about 6 inches long, but really what I have on right now is primarily extensions that I've just gotten cut. So about the length of my hair. So I'm about the same length now. I'm just waiting for the layers to grow out because I'm used to having a bob as opposed to short layered haircut.
Did you ever lose your eyebrows?
I lost my eyebrows, but it was after my treatment. I would say it was about last February, and I read that a lot. You feel like you're finished with everything, and everything's growing back, and at that point, oftentimes that's when you lose your eyebrows and eyelashes. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember I lost my eyebrows and eyelashes at the end of my Taxil treatment, and I remember thinking how weird and crazy it was. Like, you know when you go through chemo, you hear you lose your hair, but you're obviously only thinking about the hair on your head. You're not thinking about all the hair on your entire body. And I gotta say,
right.
My skin was soft as a baby's bottom. And I had no hair on my arms or my legs. I had to shave. My face was super soft. And I remember the weirdest thing was realizing that I had no hair in my nose and how weird that looked. Do you remember that point? Did you have that happen?
Yeah, I carried tissues around a little bit more often than I normally
there's nothing
do.
really to stop anything from coming out. It's just like you're there. That's crazy. Wow, that's awesome. I think that's really cool that you did that. It's a really, like you said, it's a really unique story, and that you had a lumpectomy, so you didn't have too much to recover from that, as opposed to a double mastectomy.
Right.
And you did the hair extension. So did you actually talk to your son about your breast cancer and explain to him what was going on?
Yeah. He's a teen, so it's not something that we talked about often. But we made it a family conversation, and I had the support of my husband and my son. So
right. So how often are you going in for checkups now with your oncologist?
I go in about every 4 months, and they don't do scans, but they just do a really comprehensive exam. But the threshold is pretty low. If I said that I feel something, they would probably order one.
Right.
But that's just, they don't order PET scans and MRIs often because they say that you often get a false read, which you would, get another not lumpectomy, but biopsy.
Right.
And they don't do markers either. So I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm not sure where the two camps are as to why some people do markers and some don't.
Yeah,
but,
I'm with you on that. I think it's something we've talked about throughout the broadcast is that most of us haven't had PET scans. And I think only one person talked about tumor markers. And I think it was Claire that talked about that. And you had tumor markers then? Well, I've just noticed it seems like with triple negative specific. I mean, maybe it's just because I happen to be talking to you guys and it's just a coincidence, but it seems like triple negative folks.
Right.
It seems like most of us haven't had PET scans or had the tumor markers checked, And I wonder what's behind that, and I'd love to learn more about it. I bet you the folks over at Triple Negative Breast Cancer Foundation know about that. They probably know that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I'm really glad you're able to join today. I was also thinking a lot of the folks that are on the broadcast today are folks from the Triple Negative Breast Cancer Survivors group. Are you part of that group too on Facebook?
I am.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was really cool to have a lot of you guys join and how we were able to reach and, talk from Texas to Indiana to Arkansas and all over like that, and hope to have more folks join next year when we're still here raising funds for triple negative breast cancer. I think there was a couple things we wanted to cover before, but I think we got to is really cool about the wigs, and I'm sure a lot of people watching don't realize that there's so many different options for what you can do. If you can just go bald, you can get just a regular wig, or you can have it put on your head like what you did, where it's adhered to your head actually, and then now you're doing the extensions. And I mean, like I told you earlier, you can't even tell, your hair looks great.
Thank you. And that won't work for everybody because some people's skin is really affected. It just worked for me. Yeah. But I will say that Facebook has been wonderful during this experience because, it's a closed Facebook group. Most of these are closed Facebook groups, the support groups. So anytime you have a question, you put it on there. You don't have to worry about it going to your own Facebook page. And within a few minutes, you have a bunch of responses. And I found that information was very empowering. So even if somebody's situation was different than mine, having that information of what they went through was really helpful.
Right. And so you're right. I mean, that's for me, definitely talking to folks and learning more. I remember when I first got diagnosed, yes, I made a spreadsheet of all the people that I knew of or that people were telling me about that had breast cancer, because inevitably people would be like, oh, well, you should talk to so-and-so, or you should talk to so-and-so. And so I developed this almost like a database of folks, and I had different columns, what they were diagnosed with and all that stuff. So like whatever problem I was having, I'd be like, oh, I'll go call Shirley or whoever and check and see what they did in that scenario, because they had that same thing happen or whatever. And so, Facebook has made that a lot more at your fingertips, where you have a support group right there and a safe place to talk about going through triple negative breast cancer. So you're all cleared now and you're just going in for your checkups, huh?
That's right.
That's awesome, man. Well, man, thank you so much for joining today and sharing your story. And from everybody we've had on today, there's always something that we learn that's new, or experience that you had that was different from somebody else that's really great to educate the folks watching today.